This is Vigilant Liberty Radio News from Independent Journal Review for January 7th. Former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell has been sentenced to 2 years in prison on corruption charges. The prosecution sought a 10-year sentence, but after requests by associates and family of McDonnell, the judge issued the 2-year sentence instead. During his time as Virginia's governor, McDonnell and wife reportedly received bribes including a $6,500 Rolex, designer clothing worth $20,000, and free vacations. In exchange for these gifts, McDonnell promoted materials made by a company called Star Scientific Incorporated. McDonnell and his wife are scheduled to report to prison in February, but McDonnell plans to appeal his conviction. John Boehner was re-elected Speaker of the House for a third term after facing a rare divided vote in the House of Representatives. The last time this many people voted against a majority-party Speaker nominee was in 1860, when Republicans split their vote between John Sherman of Ohio and Galusha Grow of Pennsylvania. Boehner's victory comes after reports he would retaliate against anyone who moved against his re-election. A total of 24 members of the House voted against Boehner, but Boehner still received 216 votes. Senators Chuck Grassley and Patrick Leahy have written a letter to the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security questioning the FBI's use of stingrays and the scope of exceptions in FBI policy. That policy requires the FBI obtain a warrant before using a cell site simulator or fake cell phone tower, commonly known as a stingray. However, the policy has several exemptions, including cases that pose an imminent threat, cases involving a fugitive, or cases in which the technology is used in public places or where the FBI deems there is no reasonable expectation of privacy. Senators Grassley and Leahy question the scope of the exceptions in their letter. The FBI is not the only government agency using stingrays. The IRS, DEA, ICE, Secret Service, and local police departments have purchased the devices, leading some states and cities to ban their use without a warrant. After a new law in California allowed an estimated 1.5 million illegal immigrants to apply for driver's license effective January 1st, officials in Sacramento are now concerned these new drivers will be lacking auto insurance. This has led the state to open up the decade-old California Low-Cost Auto Insurance Program, or CLCA. This allows drivers to purchase insurance through the state. Auto insurance is required by California law for anyone who owns a vehicle. Advocates argue the plan will help reduce financial risk and insurance costs for all drivers. Critics say the CLCA program has not convinced uninsured drivers to obtain insurance and that the rate of uninsured motorists has held steady for the past 10 years. It is estimated approximately 4.1 million drivers in California do not have auto insurance. This is Amy Curtis with your Vigilant Liberty Radio News from Independent Journal Review for January 7th.
Hi, this is Matt Lewis from the Daily Caller, and you are listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
Thanks for sticking around. You are listening to the Modern Comments Radio Show here on Vigilant Liberty Radio, and with me this evening are my guests, Laura Fio. Hi, Laura. And Dave, and obviously Taylor, my producer. Before the break, we were talking about the shootings, the terrorist attack that took place in France earlier today. And Laura, you lived in France for a while, so you were talking about how they satirize things in a way that Britain doesn't, that we do. The French sort of satire is different from what we may understand. And I know I had to have you hold your thought because of the break, but if you'd like to continue, please do.
Well, yeah, it's just, the point is that I'm seeing a lot of people saying that they don't like, Charlie Hebdo because it's a leftist, blah, 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 which, fine, you don't have to. But, let's face it, their center right is our center left. Mm-hmm. So it's just, it's just different. One thing, my husband and I were talking about this earlier today, the more I think about this and the more I examine France and how they act and then just socialism versus capitalism, France is not a socialized country, as it were, but it behaves very much like one. They have socialized medicine. A lot of their stuff is state-owned or state-run, state-governed. But they do have a president, and they do have elections, et cetera, that sort of thing. But one thing they do not have is a great employment rate. French youth unemployment right now lingers around 25%. And here in the States, it's around 12 to 14. And so while we think that's very traumatic there, you can imagine you can imagine it in France, a quarter of the youth, and by youth, they're talking 18 to 24. Mm-hmm. And not everybody goes to college, even in France, even though it's taxpayer paid. Mm-hmm. And, much like here, not everybody needs to go to college. So you've got 10% more of the population. So that's 6 million kids. There's 60 million. Mm-hmm. So you've got that many unemployed, non-engaged youth doing nothing. And you get disenchanted refugees or immigrants from Northern Africa, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, where many of the French immigrants come from, and maybe their parents are the first generation immigrants, and so the second generation, and they do tend to live in similar areas. You end up with the Muslim area. You do still end up with I know Paris has a Chinatown, right? I mean, people tend to be with people that they understand and get. So you get these pockets of people that never actually have to leave their people. And then they're running around unemployed, doing nothing. They're not getting paid, and they are ripe for a cause. Mm-hmm. So I don't think this is going to be, France has the largest Muslim population outside of Muslim countries. And so these guys, especially, girls too, but I think guys are more susceptible to this. They are ready for someone to come in and say, you're important and you matter and we have a job for you. And they'll get to be part of the action and part of a team. This is mm-hmm. basically France's gangs. They don't really have gangs, as it were, but this has the potential to become a big problem. And this could be the French gangs will be Muslim teens running around terrorizing people and enjoying the heck out of the publicity.
And if I remember correctly, they're a lot more militant than the older generations of North African, the Algerians and so forth were.
Yeah, there's definitely that. There's definitely that sense. They're bored. The older generation of Algerians were still of the working class. The working people. These kids live in a first world country. So they have all of the spoils that they would never get at home. Not a lot of them, and they're indulged. Frankly.
Yeah, they are.
And speaking of indulge, you had that one discussion on Twitter this morning with somebody about how how we deserve this sort of attack because we're insulting Muslims, we bring it upon ourselves.
Well, it wasn't that we deserved it, but it was more of this wouldn't have happened if we had taken into consideration other cultures and been more culturally sensitive. And I'm going to put a link up in the chat room to the series of tweets that I sent out this morning, because I turned them all into a Storify, just because there were a total of 14 of them, and it kind of encapsulates my thoughts on this, which is what I was kind of talking about before the break, where aside from the issues that Laura raises about the unemployment and these youth who are just, all the conditions are right for them to engage in this behavior. Part of it is, in the West, we think we will somehow appear morally superior if we are tolerant of everything, no matter how it contradicts with our culture, how it contradicts with our laws. You've got this in France, and I think one of the best, worst examples of this is also the stories of sexual abuse out of the UK, where the numbers that I got on Twitter, approximately 1,400 children were basically systematically sexually abused in communities, and the authorities did nothing, or if they did something, they told the parents and the children that either they were making it up or they needed to stop trying to press charges. And they were sexually abused, and nobody did anything because they were afraid of being called racist because of the demographic makeup of the alleged attackers. And that's the kind of thing that we need to stop. Political correctness, and this isn't a phrase that I came up with, and I don't remember who I got it from, but it's not my original. It creates a cultural desert. And in that cultural desert, the thinnest skinned among the populace are the ones who determine what is and isn't allowed. So you can't have satire, you can't have open discussions, you can't say things because somebody's feelings might be hurt, and therefore you are going to be accused of some sort of bigotry. And it gives me hope that I on Twitter I saw pictures of Paris, and there were thousands of people, and it may have been even 100,000 people who showed up despite the fact that these gunmen were still on the loose, to say that they are not afraid, and they support the magazine, and other publications are giving equipment and stuff to help this magazine keep running in the face of this attack. That gives me hope.
There's another aspect here, and with what happened. These attackers weren't afraid to turn on the police. They shot two of them execution style.
These police officers, I believe, were not armed.
Right, which, yeah, I know with the weapons they had, a U.S. SWAT team, I think, would have had a hard time against them, but...
They had I can't say the word. The Kalashnikov, the Russian...
AK-47.
AK-47. Yeah, and reportedly they had a rocket-propelled grenade launcher as well.
And the question we have to ask ourselves is, can it happen here? And I think the answer is eventually yes.
But
this is war.
But I also think that France, and there were some leftists on Twitter who were, for inexplicable reasons other than their own ignorance and stupidity, were trying to blame this on the NRA. And
are you serious?
Yes, I am serious. I will see if I can find the tweet.
I almost just broke FCC guidelines there, and I try not to.
It is. Hang on, I'll see if I can find it while we're talking. But France has the gun control law that they want, so it's a stupid comparison, and I think that the fact that most parts of this country still have pretty lax gun laws, which is a good thing. I mean, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. It will dissuade something like that from happening here, because
if you look at just for the record, French police for the most part carry guns. I know that everybody thinks that France is a bunch of weenies, and there's some of that.
Reason did not. But
can I break in for a second, guys? Can I break in for a second? The youngest suspect in today's deadly attack at the Charlie Hebdo newspaper has turned himself in.
Wow.
French authorities say that Sharif Kouachi turned himself in. No, I'm sorry. Hang on a second. No, whoops. I apologize. Hamid Mourad turned himself in. I misread the ABC News report. And police say he is cooperating after his surrender in the French town